successful and a holding against at all times.
Be careful.
Government officials insist that this is isolated incident different from the packet of
The wind in Amherst, Nova Scotia doesn't blow. It seeps. Through shutters, through floorboards, through the cracks in memory you thought were caulked for life. They say winter there hangs like a verdict. Gray skies, gray minds, and silence that feels more like waiting than rest. In the winter of 1878, something woke up. Not in the marsh, not in the woods, but in a cramped cottage on Princess Street, where if the papers can be trusted, the walls began to bleed thunder. There was no storm, no wind, just boom after boom after boom, shaking the very foundation. Cups rattling in the kitchen, beds shifting after midnight, and something splintering in a girl nobody knew how to mend. It started as evil often does, with the overlooked. A young woman, not a nun, not a witch, nor a prophetess. Just Esther Cox, small, stubborn, a little stout, a little strange, blue-gray eyes like glass forgotten in fog. A servant in her own home, caught between chores and hush. If the stories are true, the townsfolk began to whisper one word: devil. They called it the Great Amherst Mystery, a pretty label tacked on a box of nightmares. Accurate, but an understatement that masks what truly unfolded. Furniture flew. Bed sheets ripped themselves away in the dark. Pillows hovered overhead as though deciding who to smother. And matches, already lit, already spitting sparks, rained from nowhere. One morning, shaky letters gouged themselves into the plaster reading, "Esther Cox, you are mine to kill." A country doctor, Dr. Carrot, staked his license on what he saw. A troubled girl in pillows wrestling with invisible fists. Reporters came to scoff and left chalk pale. A down-on-his-luck actor tried to turn her torment into a traveling spectacle. But rewind the horror, strip away the knocks, the gasps, the ink-soaked witness lists, and you land on one night. One night in a buggy, in the rain, with a man she trusted. A disarming smile, but a temper armed with a gun. She came home soaked, shaking, silent. She went straight to bed, spoke to no one. The next day, the knocking began. We tend to like our hauntings tidy. Graveyard boundaries, Latin warnings, and curses with expiry dates. But what if it's messier? What if it isn't always about death, but about the scars that stay with the living? What if something shattered in Esther that night? Not bone, but something deeper. What if the pounding on the walls was the sound of a soul trying to scream through the lath and plaster? Was it a haunting? Was it hysteria? Trauma made flesh and fury? Or something worse? A possession not just of spirit, but of story. Because this wasn't only about the knocks in the night. It was about what people did with those knocks. A town, a church, a press starving for miracles or madness. They all inked their own Esther. Esther Cox wasn't merely haunted. She was claimed. By fear, by fame, by total strangers who watched her pain like theater, and selfish men who tried to sell it like tickets. And somewhere behind the peeling wallpaper and the charred cellar barrel, a barefoot girl stood in the dark, begging to be left alone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Dancing Toaster. This is Pastor Nelly, and as always, this is the place where we wrestle with the intersection of faith and the unexplained. Today we're going north. We're gearing up for a big two-parter in the Great White North, specifically Canada, if you didn't know that nickname. Perfect timing too, because a bunch of Canada is talking about joining the U.S., which would be wild. They're tired of being taxed into oblivion, just like all the people that have left Cali. In any case, I mentioned last week that we'd be going international. Though I'm based in America and the majority of my listeners are in America, second to that are my neighbors to the north in Canada. We spent some time here a few weeks ago with our Ghostbusters episode. Dan Aykroyd is of course from there, but I wanted us to cover a case that was rooted solely in Canada. So today we're covering Esther Cox and the Great Amherst Mystery. It's widely known as Canada's most paranormal case. It's terrifying, and it's a well-documented case of what many deem poltergeist activity that occurred in Amherst, Nova Scotia between 1878 and 1879.
Well documented. Did you write about it with crayons in your notepad? Is that what you count as documentation nowadays?
You're lucky people like you.
What's not to like?
That comb-over's like a sardine sundae. I don't like it.
Who asked you, basement dweller? Everyone knows I'm the favorite.
Actually, I think there are people that like Vinny more than both of us. Hey! Speaking of who our listeners like the most, we may find out pretty soon. What are you talking about? I think I'm already scientifically proven to be the favorite.
To your grandmother, maybe.
Hey, you keep my Nona's name out your mouth. Would you guys calm down and shut up? You're always ruining my announcements. Our listeners will now be able to get personalized messages from any one of us through Cameo. For those unfamiliar, Cameo is an app where you can have someone send you a personalized video message. You pick the person, tell them what to say, like a birthday wish, encouragement, a roast, or an inside joke, and they record a custom video just for you. I don't imagine I'll get too many requests for myself, but through Cameo, you can request one of these personalized messages from the frequent guests from my show, Dr. Wright or Vinny.
I don't recall agreeing to any of this.
What are you talking about? I expect to be handsomely compensated for my services. How about you both pull your weight around here, or you're fired? This is unacceptable. I'd like to file a complaint with our human resources. Sure, it's right over there.
That's just a trash can labeled G-Files.
Is that like the Temu version of the X-Files?
No, dummy, G is for garbage. That's his way of saying your complaints will go on the trash.
This is an outrage. Expect to hear from my lawyer. Is he a cousin named Vinny? No, what are you talking about? I'm Vinny. He's Sal Jr. His dad is my Uncle Sal. You ruined the joke. I was thinking, the movie, My Cousin Vinny, Joe Pesci's the attorney. Never heard of it. It's probably for the best. He's got a really foul mouth. Maybe he is related to Uncle Sal.
Can we forget about this man's family tree? Good night.
Good call, Doc. Anyways, I will convince these knuckleheads to create a personalized video for you if you want. It's purely for fun.
It feels like a shameless cash grab.
How else do you think we're going to pay for all this stuff? Making a podcast ain't free, Doc. And it ain't cheap neither. Yeah, what he said. Moving on. Before we start, just want to issue a big thank you to all my current Toasties and thank my newest Toastie, Jody. Welcome and thank you for your support. Toasties are, of course, my patrons on Patreon. I made a list and I checked it twice to thank all my current Toasties. Please let me know if I forgot about anybody. Charge it to my head, not my heart, please. They are doing their part to make the show possible, and I can't thank them enough. But you know what? Just you listening to this right now deserves my thanks. There are thousands of podcasts out there and 1,000 other things you could be doing with your time. And the fact that I get to be a part of your week means a lot. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And one more thank you is in order. This one is for my friends over at Nevermore Hollows. Last week you had a chance to hear my time with them. They graciously allowed me to share that with my audience. Go check out their show. Incredibly well written. I love the voices, and pretty soon you may be hearing one that you're familiar with over there. Hint, hint. That reminds me, I just remembered another announcement.
Oh, good night. Another one?
Shut up, this one's big. I made the announcement on the socials, but not everybody is on those, so I gotta make sure I let everyone know at the end of summer, a new show is dropping for my Toasties. What are you talking about? Ain't you already got a member show? I do, Vinny, but I've been chatting with some brothers in the faith, and that one has too much evangelistic potential to stay trapped behind a paywall.
So you're gonna keep doing that dreadful man-eating toaster show then?
Yes, Doc, I'm gonna keep doing it. I just have to work out a more feasible release schedule for it. What are your toaster heads gonna get now? Toasties, Vinny, toasties. That's what I said. The Toasties on Patreon still get early access to content, ad-free listening, and after summer, a brand new fictional narrative show. The Toaster Files, codenamed M.E.S.S.
Are you sure it's not autobiographical? Because you're kind of a mess.
Shut up and listen to the trailer. Somewhere beneath a crumbling firehouse in the Pacific Northwest, a dysfunctional team of investigators tries to keep the darkness at bay. They're underfunded, overworked, and haunted by more than just their past. This isn't the FBI. It's not even the Church Potluck Committee. This is M.E.S.S, the Ministry of Esoteric Supernatural Studies. Welcome to the M.E.S.S. There you have it, the Ministry of Esoteric Supernatural Studies, a fictional organization in a fictional town investigating paranormal mysteries at home and abroad. The biggest inspirations are the Ghostbusters, X-Files, and my friends over at Nevermore Hollows. The trailer on social media had a video that shows you some of the characters and settings. Head over there and check that out if you want. I'll tell you next week more about the show because I've already went way too long.
You think so?
Shut it. Now it is time we dive headfirst into part 1 of the Great Amherst Mystery. On a serious note, I will give a warning first. Esther Cox endured a tragic experience with a dangerous boyfriend leading up to the case. It can't be ignored because it plays a key role in everything, but I felt it appropriate to give the heads up for any of my listeners that may be unsettled by the attempted assault upon Esther Cox. And now we're finally ready to begin. Amherst was the kind of town that looked like God had set it on a slab of gray slate and forgot about it. Tucked against the northern edge of Nova Scotia, just south of New Brunswick, it wore the cold like a second skin. Winters hit hard, like fists made of ice, and even in the gentler summers, the sky rarely smiled. Just a curtain of cold draped over flat marshland and dark forests of birch and fir stretching out like nature had tried to hide something beneath the trees. The bones of the town were old, laid down in the mid-18th century by the Acadians, who called it Fort Lawrence, and long before that by the Mi'kmaq, whose spirits still whisper through the woods if you listen close. But both were swept aside without ceremony by British hands during the 7 Years' War. The war was loud. The silence afterward, even louder. By 1764, a new breed of settlers arrived. English immigrants. British loyalists running from the American Revolution with musket scars on their backs and bitterness in their eyes. They renamed the place Amherst, like it could erase the blood in the soil. Industry rose slowly. Grist mills, tanneries, sweat and steam laying the blueprint for a working town. By the 1870s, a railroad carved through the land like a scalpel, stitching Amherst into the industrial lifeblood of Canada. Ships, shoes, coal and iron. Amherst built and burned and built again. It wasn't a big place. 3,000 souls packed into a town that worked 6 days a week and prayed hard on the 7th. 4 stone churches to plead with God. An academy to fill young heads with dreams they'd probably never chase. A music hall just loud enough to drown out the grind. Factories, ironworks, sawmills, and a boot plant that hammered leather like it was gearing up for a war that never ended. And then there was Princess Street, tucked up on the northwest edge of town. It was a side road nobody wrote songs about. It was unremarkable in every way. Just a scatter of 2-story cottages, each one leaning into the other like they were holding each other up against the weight of the weather and the weight of the world. Chickens ran loose in the front gardens, pecking at nothing, squawking at everything. Horse carts rolled past on cracked stone. People moved with their heads down and collars up, all on their way to jobs that paid just enough to keep the rain off their heads. Number 6 Princess Street didn't stand out. Washed out yellow-brown walls, an angled roof tired from years of snow, and a quiet dignity that matched the family inside. Normal folks who lived like most others, unnoticed. A dairy cow chewed the cud behind the house. A garden curled around like a question mark. Life was simple, predictable, ordinary. But in the winter of 1878, the ordinary cracked like a telegraph line snapping in a blizzard. One of the daughters, a young woman, would tear through that calm like a bullet through frosted glass. And what came out of that little house didn't just shake the family. It grabbed the whole town by the throat. Thunder in the walls. Matches falling from nowhere. Furniture flung by hands no one could see. She became a name whispered in fear and fascination. Esther Cox. A small girl with fog behind her eyes, and whatever hell had taken interest in her wasn't finished. Amherst would never be the same. The Teed house sat like most others on Princess Street. Weathered wood, peeling paint, and a roof that had seen too many storms. But what made it stand out most wasn't the architecture. It was the noise. The kind of low, constant hum that comes from too many lives packed under one roof. It was a multi-generational pressure cooker. Spoons clinking against tin bowls, babies crying, boots stomping, doors slamming, voices carrying down narrow halls. The metronome of survival. At the center of it all stood Daniel Teed, factory foreman by trade, moral man by choice. He was well-liked, well-kept, and well-worn. He worked the lines at Amherst Boot and Shoe Factory by day, ran with local church folk on Sunday, and spent his spare hours trying to sell temperance like it was salvation. Teetotaling, they called it. A war on whiskey dressed in scripture and civic virtue. He meant well. Most men like that do. Olive Teed was 13 years his junior, but time had evened the scales fast. 22, mother of 2, and the unofficial commander of the domestic front. Willie was 5. George wasn't even 2. There was a cow out back, chickens underfoot, and a house that never stayed clean for long. She held it together with calloused hands and little thanks. Help came where it could. Her sisters, Jane and Esther Cox, lived with them. Both of them bound together by loss. Their mother died not long after Esther was born. Their father took one look at single parenthood and ran for the border. Maine, they said. That's where he traded in his grief for a second chance. The girls were raised by their grandmother, and when she passed, they stuck together the only way broken people know how. Quietly. Jane, who was called Jenny, was the beauty. She worked at Dunlap's store and turned heads wherever she walked. Esther, on the other hand, wasn't so easily defined. Short, solid, hair like dark molasses and eyes like storm glass. She kept to herself mostly, a fortress of quiet independence that rubbed some people the wrong way. William Cox, Olive's brother, bunked there too, another cog in the factory machine answering to Daniel on the floor. Then there was John Teed, Daniel's brother, a farmer without land drifting in and out of the house depending on whether the soil wanted him that year or not. It was a full house, noisy, cramped and constant, but it worked, at least most days. Esther's love life, though, well, that was the wrinkle in the wallpaper, the fly in the ointment. She was saying Bob McNeil. Handsome and strong, he worked the line under Daniel. A good worker, sure, but the kind of man who smelled like smoke and always had one foot in a bar fight. The family didn't like him. Jane tried to warn her. Olive gave her looks of staunch disapproval. But Esther wouldn't listen. She rarely did.
You guys don't understand. He's nothing like the rumors.
Then came the night of August 28th, 1878. The sky was low and heavy. The kind of gray that pressed on your chest. Supper was done, the dishes drying. Esther sat out front of the cottage waiting for Bob. He was late. Her head still rang from the nightmare she had the night before. Some twisted vision of bulls rampaging through the streets, mouths dripping with blood, hooves casting fire. It felt like the seams of her soul had come undone. and whatever was hiding beneath began to bleed through. She thought the buggy ride might clear the smoke. It didn't. They rode in silence at first, the buggy wheels creaking over dirt and stone, the marshland stretching out like a memory they couldn't quite reach. Then, out of nowhere, Bob stopped. He just froze.
Bob, is everything all right?
Then he jumped out of the buggy like a man possessed. Rain starting to fall in sheets, sky black as slate. And between the drops of rain emerged the gun. Esther sat there paralyzed. Bob's voice cracked the air, screaming and shaking, waving the pistol like he didn't know what he wanted more, to scare her or shoot her. "Get out of the buggy!" He ordered her out, but she refused. The barrel shook in his hand like the branches in the wind. The woods held their breath. Then, deliverance, in the form of carriage lamps. Another buggy creaked into view. Just enough to snap Bob out of whatever madness had overtaken him. He didn't say a word. He threw himself back in the buggy and whipped the reins like he wanted to outrun his own shame. He dumped Esther at the gate like trash. Mud-soaked, rain-streaked, and heartbroken. She didn't say a word as she walked inside. She just climbed the stairs, shut the door, and disappeared into her own world under her blanket, like maybe sleep could erase the last hour of her life. But sleep never came. The next few days, she wasn't Esther. She was absence in a dress, floating through the house like a ghost that hadn't figured out it was dead. She didn't speak, didn't help, just walked quiet and numb. Everyone noticed. No one asked. They figured it was heartbreak, that it'd pass. But heartbreak doesn't rattle floorboards and it doesn't whisper through walls. Wednesday, September 4th. Exactly 1 week since the night the darkness first whispered Esther Cox's name. She'd gone to bed early again. Jane, her sister and bunkmate, had come home just as the fog began curling through the streets like fingers around a neck. By 9 p.m., the house had gone quiet. Dead quiet. One of those silences that feels like it's listening. Jane slipped through the covers beside Esther, exchanging tired murmurs before the oil lamp went out. About 15 minutes later, peace shattered like glass under a boot. Esther shot up, screaming, the kind that peels paint off walls. She shrieked about something moving under the bed.
There's something under the bed! I swear! Jane, it's moving!
Thinking it was a mouse, Jane fumbled for the lamp, hands trembling. Light chased back the shadows, but there was nothing there. No mouse, no movement. Just fear thick enough to chew. Esther backed against the wall, staring like the sheets had teeth. Jane smoothed them down, put on her best big sister voice, told her to calm down. They crawled back under the covers, but sleep evaded them like it owed them money. Eventually they passed out, nervous and exhausted, waiting for dawn to pull them from the nightmare. But the night had other plans. The next evening, Esther stirred again. Same panic, same rustling beneath the bed.
Do you hear it too? Tell me I'm not losing my mind.
Jane lit the lamp with a sigh, the flame flickering like it knew what was coming. They searched the shadows. Then they heard it. Both of them. Not a scurry. Another rustle. Deliberate. This time it came from a green cardboard box stuffed with fabric scraps. Jane slowly dragged it out and set it down in the middle of the room. The girls looked at each other. Then they looked back at the box. Less than a second later, the box leapt a foot into the air. It landed suspiciously on its side. Jane picked it up and placed it down again in disbelief. As soon as she made it back to her bed, the rag-filled box jumped a second time. Silence filled the room like smoke before both girls screamed in chorus, raw and unhinged. Daniel came barreling in, half-dressed and skeptical. When they told him about the rustling in the jumping box, he laughed.
What are you talking about? Go back to sleep, it's just a bad dream.
But it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a warning. The next day was unremarkable, the kind of day that makes you second-guess the night. Esther went about her chores, helped around the house, even strolled through town. But by evening, a fever crept into her bones. She went to bed early again. Jane joined her around 10. Esther was out cold, but sleep didn't last long. Jane was jolted awake by Esther screaming again. Screaming like she was dying, Jane lit the lamp. That's when she saw her. Esther stood in the middle of the room, hair bristling like wires, face flushed red, eyes wild and wide like something primal had clawed its way to the surface. She gripped the back of a chair, so hard her nails sank into the wood. The girl was shaking, trembling in her white nightgown, glowing in the lamp's flicker like an apparition. Jane shouted for help. Olive came in first.
I am dying! I am dying!
Then the rest of the family piled in. Daniel, William, and John. All drawn by the sound of madness or something worse. They eventually got her back in bed. She was burning up, rambling and writhing.
There! There! Can't you see it? It's coming for me!
They saw nothing but said she felt like she was swelling, ready to burst. Her body was a pressure cooker, and something was rattling the lid. Then it hit. A sound like God himself kicking in the door. A thunderous boom shook the walls and silenced the room. Everyone froze. Olive checked on the boys. They were fine. There was no storm outside, just a clear, star-drenched sky. But as she returned and shut the window, boom. 3 blasts, each one sharper than the last, like the house itself was groaning under the weight of something ancient. Total silence followed. Not peace, just the kind of quiet that settles like dust on a coffin lid. Esther sank into her bed like a marionette with the strings cut. Her fever broke. The house grew still. Slowly the family trickled out, leaving Jane alone in the dark with the girl who now slept like a corpse after the storm. She turned out the lamp, pulled the covers up, and stared at the ceiling all night, waiting, listening, wondering if the house was done playing with them or if it was only just getting started. Esther woke late the next day. The fever burned off like morning mist. She drifted through town like a shadow chasing a memory it couldn't catch. Smiles, errands, a little chatter with shopkeepers, just enough normal to wallpaper over the cracks. By supper, she was helping Olive in the kitchen again, chopping, stirring and pretending. Over the dinner table, the family talked in hushed tones, dancing around the elephant in the room like it was radioactive. The bangs, the screams, the house that sounded like it was coughing up demons. No one had answers, just theories wrapped in denial. Eventually, they agreed on the safest plan. Silence. Loose lips sink reputations. No one wanted to be the family with the haunted girl. Or perhaps just as bad, the hysteric one. A few days passed. Quiet ones. Kind of quiet that makes your skin itch because you know it's lying to you. Then came Tuesday, September 10th. 4 days since the night the walls shook. Esther was burning up once again. Fevered and fading fast, she went to bed early. Jane, already worn thin from nights of half-sleep and full dread, told her to relax and try to sleep it off. But they both knew better. Around 10, Jane was drifting. One foot in sleep, the other still dangling in anxiety. That's when it happened. Not a scream or a bang. No, this time the blankets flew clean off the bed, like the bed had tried to set sail with no one aboard. They were ripped away by unseen hands, yanked across the room and dumped in the far corner like dirty laundry and yesterday's secrets. Jane hit the floor like a dropped puppet. Out cold. Then Esther belted out into the night. Like clockwork, Olive and Daniel came running, oil lamps in hand, confused, bleary-eyed, but awake enough to know something wasn't right. They saw the two girls, one unconscious and one screaming for her life. Then they saw all the crumpled bedding on the floor in the corner. Olive grabbed the blankets and threw them back over the girls, trying to patch over the madness with motherly instinct. But that night, as usual, the house had other plans. Before all their eyes, the blankets lifted again, like a ghost ship casting off its sails in a storm. Pulled straight up. Hovered for a moment, like they were deciding who to attack. And then they flung across the room yet again. But that wasn't all. This time, Esther's pillow yanked itself free and whipped through the air like a white cannonball. It smacked John across the head. He didn't hesitate. He just turned and stormed out, terror etched across his face like someone who'd finally seen enough. Not knowing what to do, Olive tried again. Third time's the charm, she hoped. She grabbed the covers, threw them back, then sat on the edge of the bed, daring the darkness to defy her. Esther moaned.
Oh.
A headache wrapped around her skull. Pressures started building behind her eyes. William, the practical one, he went for water. Downstairs, the kitchen table was still set. The water pail sat untouched. But the moment he walked back into the room, boom. Same sound, same force. Thunder without a storm. A bullet without a barrel. Like a demonic voice in the night reminding them, I'm still here. Esther melted back into the bed, breathing steadied, fever subsiding. Then sleep washed over her like a tide. The house went quiet. No more screams, no more flying linens. Just a silence so thick it suffocated the room and left everybody wondering. They all stood in the doorway, unsure of what they'd just witnessed. They didn't speak. They couldn't. There weren't words for whatever this was. Eventually, they trickled back to their rooms, but they didn't sleep, not really, because they knew something now. Whatever was in that room, it wasn't done, not by a long shot. The next morning, over burnt toast and bitter coffee, the Teeds finally broke the unspoken vow of silence. The pounding, the flying linens, the pillows swung by invisible hands. None of it could be ignored or dismissed anymore. It was time to call in a professional. Daniel left work early and walked the rain-slicked road to Dr. Carrot's office, where medicine still came with a monocle and a smirk. The doctor chuckled when Daniel told him about the frightening bangs and flying blankets.
It sounds like nothing more than children playing at ghosts.
But there was something in Daniel's eyes. Something tired. Something true. So the doctor made a promise.
I'll stay all night through to prove you have nothing to worry about here, Daniel.
At 10 p.m. sharp, he arrived at the Teed house. He found Esther and Jane already tucked in, the oil lamp casting soft amber lies across the room. The doctor ran through the motions. Pulse, temperature, the usual script.
As I said, nothing more than nervous excitement, likely brought on by a fright.
He was already preparing to declare a victory for reason, but then the pillow lifted off the bed. It floated in the air, straightened itself like a soldier standing at attention, then gently drifted back into place. The doctor blinked once, twice, then a third time in absolute disbelief, only to see it float into the air once more. John lunged, grabbed the thing like it stole something from him, but it fought back like something was pulling from the other side of nowhere. John froze. The doctor didn't. He grinned. "Wonderful," he whispered, like a man watching the impossible become fact. Then the house spoke again. The floor shook. The lamp flickered. The doctor jumped like someone had slapped him with the truth. He dropped to his knees, not in prayer, but to feel around under the bed. One last attempt to find reason. The sound followed him like a curse, never coming from one place, always just behind. Blankets joined the pillow in its gravity-defying dance. Olive tried to gather them, tried to bring some order to the chaos. That's when the scratching started. A dry, clawing scrape, like a screwdriver being dragged across drywall. And when they all looked, it was there. A dark message. "Esther Cox, you are mine to kill." Scrawled in jagged letters by a hand no one could see. The banging went on for 2 hours, the mysterious cacophony rewriting everything they thought they knew of the world.
I didn't ask for this. I don't even know what this is.
When it was finally over, the doctor stood in the doorway, soaked in sweat, fear, and cigarette smoke, promising to return with something for Esther's nerves. It's all he could think of. Spirits weren't exactly his specialty, but sedation, well, that he could manage. He came back the next morning. Esther was in the kitchen, pretending normal still existed.
"How are you doing this morning, Esther?"
I'm doing just fine, Dr. Carrot.
Her mouth said one thing. Her eyes said another. There was an awkward pause. Esther broke the silence.
Excuse me, Doctor. I need to grab something from the cellar.
She went down into the basement, but she came flying up the stairs, gasping for air.
Doctor, there was someone in the cellar. I went for some potatoes and they threw wood at my head.
The doctor led her back down, lantern in hand. Shadows wrapped the walls like wet cloth. They stood there for seconds, maybe minutes. They didn't know. But before they knew it, potatoes launched out of the dark like gunfire. They plowed their way back up the stairs and didn't look back. That night, Dr. Carrot gave her a heavy dose of something laced with opiates, thick enough to drop a horse. Esther slept, but the noises didn't. The bangs started again, louder, angrier. The doctor stepped outside, walked to the middle of the street, but he found nothing. No tricks, no kids, not even any crows. Just an old house with a secret and a grudge. But the sound had echoed through the air like God hammering nails into the sky. When he came back in, he looked different, pale and hunched over. He said the banging could be heard from dozens of yards away. Said it sounded like someone was on the roof trying to break through with a sledgehammer. The Teed's worst fears were realized the next morning. The neighbors heard. Their secret was finally out. By morning, the whole town was whispering before the kettle had even boiled. People stopped in the street, stared at the house, They were watching, listening, waiting for the sound. It didn't disappoint. As though they knew they had an audience, the bangs came in the daylight hours now too. Like whatever haunted them had grown bold and tired of the shadows. The doctor kept visiting, kept prescribing, kept watching. But the meds did nothing to silence the storm. Weeks passed like smoke through a keyhole, and through it all the family held their tongues. Though people were talking, the Teeds remained tight-lipped and wide-eyed, waiting and praying for the day when the knocking stopped or the door finally opened. Esther was coming apart at the seams. Whatever thread held her together had been fraying, and now it was snapping. The spasms weren't just nerves anymore. They were a kind of violence the body did to itself when the soul couldn't scream loud enough. 3 weeks in, the doctor stood there, and not so much diagnosing as bearing witness. Her body convulsed again. Then suddenly, stillness. Esther began to speak that night, slow and measured, like each word had to fight its way out through layers of ice in her throat. She told the doctor everything: the night with Bob, the gun, the threats, the stranger's headlights, the mercy of a horn that scared Bob off before he could damage her further, or worse, make her disappear. Until that moment, she carried this burden alone, silent, heavy. But now the secret spilled out mid-spasm, like her body had decided it was tired of hiding. When she came to, the doctor asked her,
Esther, I'd like to discuss what you shared with me.
What do you mean, Doctor?
Do you not recall sharing moments ago about Bob? About the night with the gun?
Esther paused, unsure what broke first, the sweat or the tears.
No, Doctor. I don't remember saying anything to you about that. I've barely told anyone about that night.
But it did occur. Did he truly threaten you, my dear?
I thought I could forget it. Bury it down so deep no one would find it. But it seems something did.
She confirmed it all. Every saddening syllable. It was true. For the doctor, it explained her nervous strain. For Olive, it explained everything. She felt Bob was the crack in the wall, the origin point. Olive said his name like it was poison off her tongue. She blamed him for the banging, the sleepless nights, the cold sweats, the moving furniture and linens. As she began to give her diagnosis, they say the house answered. They heard 3 loud bangs right on cue. Esther stared at the doctor.
It's listening.
The doctor didn't laugh. Not anymore. He addressed the air the way a man questions a locked door, half expecting it to talk back.
Can you hear us?
3 more bangs. Color fled from his face like a burglar from night watch, but his hand stayed steady. He decided to test his luck and ask another question.
How many people are in this room?
At first, they heard nothing. The doctor tried once more, now poking like a child with a stick.
Knock once for each person.
Five knocks. 5 people. Right on the money. Fear and wonder swept the room. The emotions tangled together like old wires sparking under a wet floorboard. But the high didn't last. Nothing else happened that night, or even the next. Shockingly, the silence came back heavy and smug. Still, the weeks rolled on, and the whispers grew louder. Rumors slipped through the walls of the Teed house like cold drafts. The town began to stitch together half-truths, and the newspapers smelled blood. The Montreal Star sent a man down, probably expected to find a prank. a young woman with a flair for theatrics. Instead, he found what would be called the Amherst Mystery. His article filled a full column, second only in importance to an ad for some fancy relish claiming to be the best in the world. Welcome to Nova Scotia. The reporter asked around. Most folks didn't hesitate to label it what it smelled like: demonic. Supernatural was the word on the street. Old world evil in a new world shell. Even Reverend Temple, calm as a man could be, said he had seen a bucket on the kitchen table boil on its own. Still, he clung to the idea that science eventually would catch up. Not everyone kept their feet that close to the ground. A man named Mr. Pride, the foreman at the Amherst Boot and Shoe Factory, he fancied himself a man of action. He said he'd cornered Bob McNeil the moment Esther's story hit the air like blood in baptismal water. According to him, Bob cracked like a weak safe. He confessed to everything, but after that he mysteriously disappeared, slipped out of town like a rat at sunrise. Mr. Pride claimed Bob was into mesmerism, said he'd seen it before. The hypnosis, the mind tricks. He believed Bob was involved with that, and even worse. He thought that maybe Bob broke more than Esther's trust that night. And when he did, perhaps something entered those cracks. Something ancient. Something hungry. Sounded like lunacy to some. Then again, so did beds that unmade themselves, and walls that spoke in thunderclaps. Everyone had a theory, and none of them involved peace and quiet. What started as whispers had bloated into backroom gossip, then burst in a full-blown spectacle. People lined up like it was a sideshow attraction, not just rubberneckers. Witnesses, signing statements, swearing on Bibles. The whole town wanted a piece of the ghost on Princess Street. The Teeds hadn't asked for this, but now they were caught in the blast radius of something far louder than any bang. Infamy. The house on Princess Street didn't belong to them anymore. It belonged to the stories. It belonged to the press, to the open mouths of strangers. And the scariest part? Spirits eventually got bored. The spotlight never does. They came from across Canada and even from across the border below. Suitcases loaded with clothes and curiosity, obsession driving the train. Everyone wanted to see the Amherst Mystery for themselves. Wanted to hear the bangs, feel the air shift, watch the sheets fly like they were hanging from spectral clotheslines. The Teed house became a carnival sideshow with no tickets and no rules. Packed day and night, strangers on the lawn, eyes in the windows. And more than once, the police were called just to keep fists from flying. People got angry when they couldn't squeeze into the little haunted cottage. Desperation doesn't wait in line. Then, like some twisted mercy, Esther fell ill. Doc said diphtheria. 2 weeks in bed. 2 weeks without the bangs. Without voices, without flying linens or ghostly vandalism. The crowds thinned. Thinned just enough for the dust to settle. When she got better, she left town for Sackville. 2 more weeks, making a full month of peace. The house stood still. Not a whisper, not a crack, not a creak. But the calm was all a lie. They say when Esther returned, the storm came back with her. And this time it wasn't just knocking. It planned to kick the doors down. The bangs came back, but this time they were louder. They were meaner. Day or night didn't matter. They echoed through the walls like a war drum. By now the crowds were like the bangs. They too were bigger, louder, bolder. Some of the amateur ghost hunters and spiritists tried to establish contact with the force behind the mystery, calling out into the void with questions and bargaining. 3 knocks for yes, 1 for no. They asked the air questions like it was a courtroom.
Are you a man? Are you a woman?
Did you ever live in this world? Have you been dead for long? Are you the spirit that's been tormenting Esther? Will you leave her in peace?
Eventually, Esther began hearing voices. She claimed they were spirits tormenting her. Said they used to be alive.
The most troubling spirit says he wants to burn this house to the ground.
When she said this to Jane, Jane didn't wait. She ran to Olive and Daniel. She warned him. Daniel shrugged it off. One of the visitors had told them this was just electricity. Static charge. Nothing to worry about. He even laughed.
Electricity can't start a fire.
Then one of the most bizarre phenomena from the Amherst Mystery began. Matches started falling. Lit matches fell from the air. From nothing. Over the next 10 minutes, the Teeds scrambled like rats on a sinking ship. Everyone was stomping out matches that seemed to materialize from thin air. Daniel, extremely rattled now, cried out and asked the house,
Are you going to burn us down?
There was no more laughing. 3 days passed. Nobody breathed right. Every creak in the floorboards sounded like a fuse being lit. Then the unthinkable happened. A fire started in the cellar. At the time, the whole family was upstairs and accounted for. They knew this was no mistake. It wasn't negligence. It was war. Olive ran toward the smoke with the only weapon she had, the kitchen's drinking water bucket. The fire was already mocking her. An entire barrel of wood shavings had been set ablaze, like kindling for a funeral pyre. She ran screaming into the street. Someone answered the desperate call. A stranger tore into the house. He yanked up the dining room rug, and he smothered the fire like he'd been born for it. Quick thinking. Right place, right time. He saved the house. Maybe even the whole neighborhood. To this day, there is no record concerning the identity of the mysterious stranger who delivered them from the blaze. But something changed that night. This wasn't a curiosity anymore. Wasn't just a haunted girl and a house with a grudge. This was dangerous. If the wind had been wrong, if the night had been drier, Princess Street might have gone up in a blaze, and everyone in Amherst knew it. The house hadn't burned away, but the fun everyone was having outside of the house had burned away. All that remained was fear. The curious still trickled in daily, armed with coins in their palms and questions for the unseen.
How many keys do I have in my pocket?
Then they'd wait with bated breath for the raps to count out the answer. 3 knocks. 4. The sound of a haunted guessing game with stakes no one understood. But like a casino, the house always won. Despite the flames with all these strange happenings on Princess Street, the other side was growing as loud as the curious and believing. The skeptics and critics, the ones who whispered fraud, madness, and attention-seeking, they had their fill and wanted to explain, pick apart, and put out the fire of mystery burning in Amherst. The town was firmly divided. The mystery had caused it to crack like the spine of an old book, and in the middle of it all stood Daniel Teed, watching his family and his house rot from the inside out. He didn't speak much anymore, but the fear in his eyes said more than words could. By January, the matches came back, falling from the ether, lighting themselves and setting the family's nerves on fire even when the flames didn't catch. Daniel had seen enough. He made a call no one expected him to make. He said,
I'm sorry, Esther, but you're gonna have to go away for a while.
Some say it was an apparition that finally pushed him over the edge. Esther screamed one night. Said she saw a man, a ghost in gray, old, rough, eyes like knives, beard like thorns. She said he stood in the room, laughing through broken teeth, and told her, Leave tonight, or I'll burn the house with all of you in it. She believed him. Who could blame her? I think Daniel did too. Fortunately, the Teeds had a friend, a saloon owner named John White, the kind of man with more guts than caution, in a spare room upstairs. Esther moved in. For 2 weeks, the storm on Princess Street died down. The house quieted. The spirits took a breather. Mr. White didn't trust leaving Esther alone, so he put her to work in the kitchen of his saloon. That's where the show really began. Turns out the spirits hadn't left. They simply moved down the street. They say Esther started to read minds in the saloon.
How much change do I have in my pocket?
You have 33 cents.
What about me?
You only have 1 copper coin.
Well, what's the date on it?
The date on your coin is 1873.
Whoa. She continued guessing pocket change and telling customers the date stamped on coins she hadn't seen. The crowds loved it. The saloon boomed. For a while, it paid in coins and applause. A haunted girl with parlor tricks was good for business. Until the fires started. Whispers at first. Flickers in corners. Embers with teeth. But fires never small, not when it came with threats. The saloon began to breathe wrong. Furniture scraped across the floor like it had somewhere to be. Tables slid. Chairs twitched like Esther so many nights ago. And then the oven. Solid steel ripped clean off its hinges like it was paper in the wind. That's when the blood showed up. And the spirits stopped pretending to be polite. A young boy named Fred lost track of his pocket knife one night. Seconds later, the knife was buried in Esther's back. The spirits were done with the parlor tricks. Mr. White didn't hesitate. March rolled around and he handed her off like a cursed heirloom. This time Esther landed with Captain James Beck out in New Brunswick. A new cast of players arrived. Doctors, spiritualists, ghost chasers who didn't scare so easy. They tried table-tipping sessions, the old parlor tricks. Esther answered their questions through knocks, scribbles, and empty stares. She claimed,
There are 3 spirits that speak to me. One is Peter Cox. He says he's my brother, born before my mother died. Then there's Maggie Fisher. I don't know much about her, but she's very kind. She tries to comfort me after the 3rd spirit troubles me. The 3rd spirit is Bob Nickel. He's the one that always threatens with the fires.
Esther claimed that Peter and Maggie tried to keep Bob in line. But Bob, he wanted to watch the world burn. After 3 weeks, Esther moved again. This time she took up residence in an old farmhouse just outside Amherst with the Van Ambergs. Things quieted once again. A little longer this time. Like a wound beginning to scab. But it seems that peace never lasts in stories like these. For some reason, Esther would return. She came back to the Teed house on Princess Street. Back to the saloon during daylight hours for work. With her return to Amherst came the return of the spirits. The hauntings persisted, but Esther had picked up some new tricks while in New Brunswick. She began to practice automatic writing. Also known as psychography, you sit with a pen, but they say you're not the one holding it. The words bleed out like a confession from somewhere else, from something else. In seance halls and shadowed corners of the occult, they say it's how some spirits speak. Ghosts, lost souls, and things that never had a name but still want a voice. You don't write the words, they write you. Esther's pen was flying, pages and pages of it. Curses, obscenities, slurs scratched across the paper in a hand that she said wasn't hers. The local clientele ate it up. She smiled, accepted their coins, and tried to play it all off. But every word written brought her one step closer to mental breakdown. Months passed. More pages, more performances, more voices. And then came the summer of 1879, when Amherst was visited by a new player. An actor arrived, drawn by the whispers and the headlines. He wasn't there to solve anything. They say he was there for a payday, to shine a spotlight on the ghost story, or to die trying to sell tickets to it. Walter Hubble was born in 1851, a New York Shakespearean actor with a stage voice full of bravado and a family full of lawyers who'd rather pretend he didn't exist. He was the black sheep in grease paint, running a decently respected theater troupe and chasing curtain calls instead of courtrooms. He was described as a lean man, maybe 120 pounds with no flesh to spare, veins like wire, wrists sharp as bones, long hair swept back like a man trying to outrun death, and an earnestness no caricature could mimic. This Ichabod Crane look-alike was born to play men haunted by daggers and ghosts. By winter of 1878, Hubble was touring Canada with his company, trying to sell tragedy to towns that already had enough of their own. That's when he heard about the Amherst Mystery. Ghosts, bangs, fire from nowhere, and a young woman with a tortured soul. He'd seen the headlines. He didn't believe a word of it. But his disbelief was not outweighed by his curiosity. A few years prior, back in 1872, he'd studied spiritualism hard. He was trying to pull a grieving friend away from a circle of so-called mediums who were more interested in seances than salvation. He had exposed them, stripped away their tricks, and thought he'd buried the supernatural with it. Still, something about Esther Cox caught his eye. Maybe it was her face in the papers. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe it was the smell of potential profit. He'd been in show business long enough to know a good act when he saw one, he thought. He saw box office gold in her innocent and tormented soul. He wrote to John White, the saloon owner with a haunted kitchen and too much free time. He suggested a tour.
Esther Cox, the simple-hearted village girl stalked by spirits from Nova Scotia.
White didn't say no, but his reply dripped with drama.
Oh, visit soon, preferably before she's consumed by the devil or the city is burned to the ground.
Hubble couldn't resist. He fired back, promised to arrive by June, and told White to keep Esther safe. Weapons loaded and a bucket of water ready. On June 11, 1879, Walter Hubble stepped into Amherst and sat down to eat at White's saloon. He was then taken straight to the Teed House to meet the girl behind the mystery. His first impression? Controlled skepticism. Theatrical nonsense, he thought. Smoke and mirrors, nothing more. He smiled politely while White and Esther spun the tales.
I don't know what it is, but it wants me. It said I was to die, that I belonged to it now.
Meanwhile, he made a silent vow. Write it up, expose the fraud, turn the whole thing into a lecture tour. Fame, profit, and closure. If it wasn't marketable, he already had a plan B. Thought maybe he could profit from putting out the flames. But something got to him. That night he came back with questions and a pocket full of tests. One of the questions was something everyone could know. He asked for the time. 9 knocks, then a pause. 4 knocks. 8. 9:48. The knocks had it. He asked something no one else in the room could know. He asked about the number on his watch. Not the time, but the serial number typical of a pocket watch of the day. He says the knocks matched. Each digit was accurate from left to right. He even asked for the date on a coin in his pocket. 1 knock. 8 knocks. 7. And 6. It was another hit. The date on the coin in his pocket was indeed 1876. He described the knocks as having come from the table, but said no one touched it. No one even moved. He says he watched every hand and every foot by the flickering light of the oil lamp. He saw no tricks. The craziest thing, he said, is not even he knew the number on the watch or the coin's date in his pocket prior to asking the spirits. He left the house that night shaken, his pipe burning down to the stem as he lay in his hotel bed, eyes wide open, replaying every knock in his head. By morning, they were packed and on the road. Hubble, Esther, and White. The grand tour had begun. To Hubble's shock, the world wasn't buying it. They hit a wall fast. Crowds came, but not to believe. They jeered, they mocked, and they laughed. called it a hoax in print and in person. One newspaper spat venom in black ink.
A subject for exhibition to mystify the unwary. A pitiable sensation, base and disgusting.
Another said the only mystery was how anyone fell for it. The public wanted miracles, but they wanted them on their own terms. After just 9 days, the grand tour collapsed. They limped their way back to Amherst, humiliated. Hubble lost his chance at glory. Some say Esther lost something deeper. Hope. The trauma stuck like smoke in her lungs, and she suffocated a little more each day. White pulled her from the saloon. Hubble stayed behind. No more lectures. No more exposés. He wasn't trying to expose something anymore. He was trying to understand it, because he concluded whatever was haunting that girl must be real. Hubble had walked into the Teed house as a skeptical actor. By the time he walked out, he'd been a full believer with bruises. In his time there, he claimed he'd seen the furniture move. He heard the bangs like thunder in a coffin. He even watched knives fly at him like the fangs of a serpent right through the air. Esther informed Hubble.
Mr. Hubble, Bob Nickel told me he hates you.
The spirits grew more territorial and personal. Hubble shockingly wasn't afraid. Quite the contrary. Now he was addicted. What started with 3 alleged spirits, Bob Nickel, Peter Cox, and Maggie Fisher, well, it had grown into a crowd that could fill the saloon Esther used to work at. New faces emerged from the ether. Mary Fisher, who was apparently the sister of the elusive Maggie. Jane Nickel, they didn't know her full story but felt she was probably Bob's wife or maybe a sibling of the Firestarter. Then there was Eliza McNeil, the alleged sister of the abusive ex-boyfriend who thrust Esther into this nightmarish, downward spectral spiral. Esther told Hubble,
Maggie hangs from the attic trapdoor by her arms, like a ghastly gymnast. Jane and Eliza, they float through the hallways dressed like kitchen staff. Specters that look like they're still waiting tables.
Hubble wanted answers, so he threw out some more questions. Knocks poured in like an ethereal drumline. Always 3 for yes, 1 for no.
Have you ever lived on Earth? Have you seen God? Are you in heaven? Are you in hell? Have you seen the devil?
The interview promptly ended when one of the spirits allegedly hurled Hubble's ink bottle across the room like punctuation on a threat. He kept a journal. A few pages made it into the Western Chronicle. The entries read like dispatches from a war nobody else could see.
June 25th. I've been pulling pins out of Esther all day. 30 or more. I watched them appear from nowhere, hanging in the air before sinking into her skin. Even my own ears weren't safe. A chair from my bedroom was thrown down the stairs. No one was upstairs. I saw another chair in the parlor tip over, then leap up again. We were 5 feet away. We both saw it.
By July, Hubble had seen enough. He left Amherst convinced that what he had witnessed was not fraud. It was something else. Something very real, whatever that meant. But maybe he'd left too soon. After his departure, things are said to have heated up in the house once again, quite literally. The matches started falling from nowhere again. This ethereal fire in the air led the landlord to say enough was enough. He said that eviction was imminent unless Esther disappeared. Pressed, they were forced to send her back to the Van Ambergs, back to the quiet rural family farm. Again, peace followed her like a truce, but only for a while. Esther seemingly recovered. She kept her head down. Eventually, she found work on the Davison farm outside Amherst. Her life was stable, quiet, almost normal. But normal doesn't last when Bob Nickel is still breathing down your neck. The spirits made brief appearances. Back came the flying objects, even a knife aimed at Mr. Davison's head. They managed until October. The flames kindled in October. According to Esther, Bob Nickel, the infamous arsonist, finally had his way. A barn went up in flames on the Davisons' property.
It wasn't me! It wasn't me! It was Bob Nickel!
Esther said she was under Bob Nickel's influence. She stole clothes from the wash line during the day, and that night, she walked into the barn and struck a match. She was arrested for arson, pleaded not guilty. The court wasn't having it. She was sentenced to 4 months.
I never meant to bring harm to anyone. I just want it to stop.
The public, who once jeered, surprisingly, now rallied behind her. Out of nowhere, a petition won her early release in December of 1879. She returned to the Van Ambergs, quiet and spirit-stained. Soon after, she disappeared from history's spotlight. The mystery faded, but Hubble didn't. In 1879, he published a famous work entitled The Great Amherst Mystery. It sold over 55,000 copies. In the late 19th century, a book selling 5,000 to 10,000 copies was already considered a modest success. Selling 55,000 copies was a national phenomenon. The book was clearly a bestseller and clearly a money-maker. Because of this, many to this day question his sincerity and say he simply wanted to cash in from the beginning. I suppose we'll never really know. It's said by some that later in life Hubble leaned into the spiritualism he once combated. He joined the circles he once exposed. Esther, well, she married twice, had a son with each husband, ultimately changed her name, and faded into obscurity. She clung to her silence. One rumor says she saw a Native American witch doctor, that he sealed the spirits inside her. We have no records and no details of this event, just another page in the myth. She never spoke of it again publicly. They say she feared that if she did, the spirits might find a way back. She died in Brockton, Massachusetts in 1912, sadly at the age of only 52. Buried under a different name, her death, characteristic of her life, a great mystery.
So, what was it? Mass hysteria? A fractured mind in a broken world? Or a war in the spirit? One girl's soul caught between the cracks. You've heard the witnesses, you've walked through the house, you've watched the matches fall. Join me next week for part 2, where we flip the lights on. We'll dissect the evidence, we'll test the spirits, and we'll open the scriptures and do an equally thorough deep dive. You'll be surprised to find out there is an account in the Bible with striking parallels to Esther Cox. Her tale will be our story next week, and we'll use both of their lives to better understand what could have unfolded in Amherst a century and a half ago. I hate splitting things up in two, but I do hope you enjoyed the longer story. I had to do it. It's a case I must say I previously knew nothing about, so I sought to be thorough. A big thanks to Rebecca. She is a fan and friend of the show. Thank you, Rebecca, for doing the voiceover for Esther. Let her know how awesome she did in the comments. That definitely will not be the last time you guys get to hear from her. This has been The Dancing Toaster and part 1 of The Great Amherst Mystery. As always, thank you for listening. Next week is part 2. In the meantime, please like, share, subscribe, comment, follow, do all the things wherever you consume The Dancing Toaster. But whatever you do, don't consume toasters, and don't let the flames of any ethereal matches consume you. I love you. I'm out.
Report suspicious activities and call 911 for immediate response. Expect delay.
Nobody else will be taken from the south. Stand by. Flight 022. Maintain approach. You're clear for
Expect traffic delays and restrictions. Take personal security precautions to avoid becoming a victim of an attack. Avoid crowded public areas and gatherings. Not travel in areas affected by the attack or in a known area elevated virus activity. Keep emergency supplies accessible and opposing a gas at all times.
Be careful.
Government officials insist the decision of isolated incidents different from the packet. Okay? No The